So I'm moving on again, collecting everything in boxes, packing up the books and rediscovering old markers in the process, faded notes upon the margins I'd forgotten, insights overlaid with restless years, inspiring chapters that surrender up the postcards sent by lovers. Miraculous small change of memory, pressed between the covers. It's always like this, moving on. Books of favourite verse fall open with the business cards of chances. A boarding pass I couldn't throw away. Her birthday gift of shots of her in bed with me, provocatively mounted. Itineraries of the heart, a rare thing, sintered down to art. More questions here than answers. This stoneware vase you made, familiar grace and strength, is travelling with me still. I trawl up papers from its green interior, recall our New York meetings on my journeys, recall the loft on Chambers Street, converted warehouse studio in post-industrial chic, the fame of which you'd seldom speak and wore so lightly. English artist from my hometown, collecting stateside accolades, become a rising name. November 71, New York. That bright and wintry morning, see, waiting for a car delivery job to get me south, I've wandered down a few blocks from your studio to take a look at Wall Street. Find this imperial pantheon, haughty pediment, impervious stone columns of the stock exchange above the quake and din of cars. I meet again that gasoline and coffee smell, the steam of breath on sunlight where a million strangers came and went. Trace frozen exhalations of the city you knew well. That's me, complete with beard, a new MA, the one extending his postgraduate experience. Variations of the road to be uncovered. Mind left open as a notebook, and you're part of it. Round the stove, our talk was Huxley, vision, mescaline, and art. And something like Sartori you had seen there on the street still sets apart those distant conversations in my travels. Even now, as time unravels out the plot lines of our lives into a mix of the amazing, the absurd, and misadventures of the heart. Some years later, following my father's death and on the move again to seek distraction in new places, I was heading north for Canada and looked you up before I took a train for Montreal. Strange meeting that, surrounded by your animated figures, machined to life in perspex sheet, tricked out in packs of coloured plastic granules, formed to business suits in corporate moves, bikinis, bathrobes, sexy little numbers not quite adding up, alluring ciphers never quite complete. Suggestions of these faces, quite familiar, half known. They eavesdropped on the studio in crafted unreality. Struck eerie poses later while I settled on the couch to sleep and pass one of the stranger nights I've known. In a troubling dream, I found myself a mourner at a funeral. My late father was beside me as a mourner too, although the question who it was we mourned was never answered. Dawn, glacial grey and iron cold, was sliding through the roof lights, as the speechless crowd, like sarsen stones on some bleak moor, emerged from the retreating tide of sleep. A moment saturated in your images, coercive and seductive games, desires become transparent, had crystallized around me into day, and I was in there, in your gallery. How strange, among these books and packing cases, still, long afterwards, I probed that lost awakening. The dawn's uneasy chill. To modify the detail, see the bigger picture. And following this principle, I headed west as early snows lay light in Montreal. And north of Lake Superior, I sat and watched the continent unroll itself behind the locomotive, watched the frozen lakes grow smaller at my back. I lost in numbing distances as snow began to blur the faint distinctions of the plains. Perspectives of the endless prairies swallowed up tomorrow. Behind me, on the western track, mere pinpoints in the wilderness, resound the names of Medicine Hat, Moose Jaw, and Indian Head. And as days pass, the sounds of Brandon, Winnipeg, Sioux Lookout fall far back into the vastness of a memory, to eastward. A fitful sleep was broken by a station in the night. I seized the chance to stretch my legs and see the place, took in the rocky mountain air. An empty platform, granite frost still tingles on my face. Another freeze frame for your gallery. Muted gleams of yellow light, the engines idling. Moment heady with a mix of diesel, wood smoke, hot machinery, the plumes of rising steam, the crunch of snow. That's me, mouth open, awestruck by the stars. I said hello to Banff, but no one answered. The bigger picture blazed above. I travelled on, below. Vancouver Island. From this window at the forest's edge, enjoy the view. Green timbered islands, miles of glittering ocean, way back to BC's Pacific coast. Sal manages the cement plant and plays a mean jazz keyboard. Fought with Castro and his forces in the old days. When Batista and his cronies fell, he got another job, to run the Ministry of Oil Resources for Fidel. This long afternoon spent drinking brandy in a kind of seminar on jazz piano styles, George Shearing through Thelonious Monk. I got more than a little drunk, but listened to the tale he had to tell. When the party's dogs began to bite, he sent his wife and children out of Cuba on a holiday, then sailed a tiny boat at night towards Miami. Didn't have a pot to piss in when I landed. I left everything behind. He took some food and water on his boat, he said, but mostly it was packed with these jazz records we've been listening to. I know that what he says is true. He's married to my father's younger sister, a wandering beauty Dad described and last saw in his youth. You'd have loved to hear her talk, and in the open northern accent of our hometown, of life in Castro's Cuba, of Che Guevara coming round to call. Oh, Che, he was the genuine article. He often came to visit us, a gentleman. She spoke there of a unique friend, and not a Marxist icon. She spoke of an impossible idealist. I won't pretend that ever since it doesn't strike me differently, that picture of his captured corpse, surrounded by his killers. That image is her valued friend, you see. Sal has a hard look in his eyes and turns back to the keyboard. When he plays, it's clear he's playing for himself now, not for me. Lights sinking in the water. Leave him, lost in explorations of the unknown theme. And picking up your vase again, I blow a little dust away. Here, further on and up the road, mysterious counterpoint of lives. Che's dead eyes and Sal improvising. something free and bittersweet that's blowing through the years between. I wrote, of course, a couple of letters, snapshots of adventures, insights, close shaves written on the road. I heard they didn't reach you later. And sitting in a Cheshire pub back home, I got the word. George Irish innocently said, "Oh, didn't you know? A diving accident months ago. Oh, didn't you know that John was dead?" Me, glass frozen at my mouth. And see, this sudden sentence makes the bigger picture dark, opaque. That group around the table, grey to dawnlight tableau in your gallery. I saw the past close over you. In letters to the dead, I knew I'd said the last there was to say. An empty vase is what remains to take in moving on. An empty vase, a postscript. Dark questions from the bottom of a lake. Bubbles from the bottom of a lake.